Hello and welcome to LEC Postgame Lobby. I'm incredibly blessed tonight. I am joined by three wonderful guests. I've got Papa Smithy, Broxah, and Bwipo here, fresh off your win against Schalke. We talked a little bit about it in the pre-game. It, on paper, seems like a pretty close matchup, but you didn't make it look that close. It was a very dominant performance from you guys. I've got a sort of a broad question here because we've seen Rekkles now play Karma 4 times. Does he like playing Rekkles? Does he like playing Karma, or is he just kind of like, I'll play Karma, it's fine?
I mean, I honestly...
Be honest, boys.
Be honest.
I think he genuinely thinks it's one of the better bot laners because I think it's pretty unanimous that AD carries are a bit iffy right now, and you need to have the right situation for them, whereas Karma, universal champion, you can play it in pretty much every matchup and at the very least farm, right? Which, again, it is a strong suit. I don't want to downplay him here by saying farming is what he's like best at, but really, he's a really smart player that knows how to take the scaling champion and be relevant in the late game, and guess what? Karma's exactly that.
And it gives that auto priority, right? It gives that ability to push, to control the lane, very hard lane to actually dive and kill. So you can kind of leave it on an island and it'll probably be fine. You can try to turret dive it depending on the jungler and it can be fine. So you understand why he goes to it, but I know other fans are looking for the Tristan Sivir that, you know, around the corner, hopefully.
I think he enjoys just, taking a step back sometimes and, stepping out of the spotlight and just shielding people and kind of chilling in the backline.
What do you prefer? Because you're just on Ivern, much more on the shielding side. Like, do you like getting in there and ganking hard on the Lee Sin? Like, if you had to choose, like, Lee Sin, Ivern, two kind of different camps of jungler?
Well, I'm not going to lie. It felt a bit weird today being on Ivern after playing a lot of Lee Sin games recently. But I don't know. Sometimes it's kind of fun, to be in a different position and have an entirely different playstyle for a game or two. And yeah, I mean, I don't mind. Obviously, I do prefer my aggressive junglers, but here and there, it's all right to worry about the Ivern, I would say.
Interesting that obviously Bwipo, you weren't really out of your comfort zone here. You had Aatrox.
I'm not sure why the champion is still open. Like.
but it's kind of an interesting thing because I looked at that draft that you guys had and I thought this looks like a really comfortable draft for Fnatic. What was going through your minds when you were like Hilly being hard targeted in the draft and you were like, wait a second, we just kind of got everything that we want? Did you just go into that game thinking this is great? Like I'm so happy with the outcome of this draft.
I mean, I think on 4-5 we were a bit worried that they were going to last pick support and get a really good matchup with the Lucian, right? That's a bit scary. So I was like, But then they 4-pick Nautilus and we're like, so they even threw that out of the window, right? And then last pick Kennen, like, I feel like at this point there is something better for... We banned the Camille. I was a bit worried about maybe a Fiora or something with the Sejuani. Melee synergy, there's the Kled coming up with the anti-healing buff, right? Just something in terms of synergy with the Sejuani and then attacking the Aatrox, but the Kennen doesn't really bring either.
I know my take looking at the draft, kind of where it was, the Blitzcrank did seem right because, of course, the Karma interaction now is so preferential for the Blitz, so the ban came through there. And then when I saw the Nautilus, I was thinking about where you could go, and like you mentioned, if this is like Khan, it's going to be a Fiora, right? That was super likely there. To me, and we were talking about this off-air, it's the on-hit Kennen. I assumed it would be just to try to at least attack Aatrox in the lane and kind of keep him on a lower health bar. But you guys and the EU analysts are really off the hype train on the on-hit Kennen. What is it about it, do you think, that just doesn't translate? Is it that the meticulous macro that Korean teams talk about that I don't really believe in? But what is it about it?
I feel like it's a mentality thing, right? When you pick on-hit Kennen, you are kind of relying on pure skill, right? You don't really have a button to press like AP Kennen does, right? Yeah, you int it the whole game, you run mid, you press your R button, you get a 5-man stun. There's hope. AD Kennen, you fall behind, it's all on you, right? You have to right-click your way out of the situation, as well as the scaling. It's purely based on skill, right? You need to be able to use the stuns, know what you're doing. We see insane highlight plays from some of the Korean Kennens because they're really, really good at this, right? But again, in a game like this, if you don't know what you're doing on the side lane and you decide to walk into a 5v5 with the on-hit Kennen, it's lost.
So what you're saying here is that EU top laners are not...
No, I think they're capable of playing it. It's just, in general, I feel like there's always a dispute of what region thinks what champions are actually good. There's always this mix, right? For example, I've been obviously a huge advocate of Aatrox the whole entire way through. And I know LCK has liked Aatrox for a very long time, but I know it dropped parity in different regions over basically the year that he's been viable. But I feel like there's always this 1 or 2 picks that are like a bit niche. to a region, and I feel like On-Hit Cannon is definitely in the Korean era.
I actually have a follow-up question to ask. It's kind of related to the point Leader was making about like everyone plays Azir Corki because they're scared of moving forward. Like obviously you are playing the Rengar and trying to lead and fly the flag on that. And you get a lot of flack when it loses and probably some begrudging kind of like, well, you know, the Rengar mains are DMing you, I guess. After the no DMs? Oh,
no, I mean, they would be happy, right? Nice, you make my champion look like crap.
That's fair. But at the end of the day, like, where do you lie on that debate? Because I've heard that a lot of pro players don't innovate because they're afraid of the flame if the thing that they brought to the table and got okayed didn't work. Like, you're playing the Rengar, so that's already something, but where do you lie on this kind of debate?
I feel like it's team specific. You got to find what works for your team, right? Like for me, I notice we needed some physical damage in the top lane sometimes against champions like Neeko, Kennen. I didn't know where to look, right? So check up some win rates, look. Guess what? Rengar's beating every single range champion in the top lane, so you know what? Maybe he's worth a shot.
But even that, like I heard you say that 2 weeks ago on the analyst desk, and it made a lot of sense, right, on the show. It made a lot of sense, and it tracked one-to-one, and yet you're still volunteering a pick that other people look at and think of as a troll pick. You know, we had the OP or Int earlier today, and people were pretty lopsided on that one.
It goes both ways, right? Your team has to accept it. It has to be something that obviously has a bit of working in scrims. It's not my first pick that I've tried out in scrims. I went a bit iffy. So
you willing to name anything? How's the Garen looking?
No, I have a similar champion actually that I've been playing a bit. If anyone does a bit of scouting, it's Singed, right? I play a lot in solo queue, and it's the same type, right? Like, Singed can work. It can be a really good champion if the game goes the way it should, but it doesn't always. And my point on the On-Hit Cannon is this type of champion, you feel really useless, even if your team is losing and you're really fed, you still can't do anything, right? You're reliant on your team at the end of the day, and you need to have that pressure to be able to carry a game start to finish. And I can see why some EU top laners have a bit of ego, much like me, and I'm like, but guys, I was super strong, but I can't team fight, and then you're like, I can see why people don't play it.
So we actually have the Kia Player of the Kia Player of the Game results here, and Broxah, you have won again. 44% of the vote going your way for the Kia Player of the Game. I think it was a close affair, though. Obviously, 44%, 3 choices, just pipping over the mark. I think you were in the mix there as well, Bwipo.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think it was you. I think it was definitely you two. I can't remember the final choice, but. Hylissang was the final one. So yeah, but Broxah pips the mark there. There has been, this is an interesting question, Broxah, because from just reading online sometimes, there's been a little bit of sort of people raising questions. I mean, we go back to spring last summer. Broxah was the golden child of the jungle, right? He comes in, can't do any wrong. People have been sort of raising questions. They've been saying, oh, is Broxah like that good? Is Broxah, you know, like the sort of the standout player? I think you've just shown there that you obviously are still one of the best junglers in Europe. Has there been a point throughout the split where your confidence has been a little bit lower, maybe because of this or otherwise?
Actually, it's kind of interesting for me because one of the things that people were talking about coming into the split was how confident I was going to be, especially now with a substitute jungler coming in, how good I'm going to look. You know, there were so many rumors and questions about me, but actually I'm still really confident, and I've been the entire time. And I don't know, I feel like one of the things that's interesting about the jungle role is that people from the outside never really know what exactly the jungler is bringing to the team. Like, for example, I can look at G2 and I can say that, wow, Jankos is playing really well. And he's playing amazing, but I don't know, you know, what exactly Jankos brings to the team and how, you know, like it's just so much harder to judge a jungler from the outside than the other roles, I feel like, and there's so much depth into it. And then at the same time, some analysts think that you should play jungle a certain way, some thinks you should play another, and I don't know. I've changed up my playstyle a little bit this split. In spring, you know, we were not really getting the success we needed, and we decided to change the strategy up a bit. I talked to the coaches about it, and we agreed on, okay, let's try to mix up our jungling style a little bit for this split and see how it goes. And to be fair, it's been working really well for the most part. There was like 1 or 2 games that were not ideal, but for the most part, it's been working.
I actually have a question, because as a jungler, there's some games where your start's not ideal, like maybe Trick this game where he tried to invade, didn't get the buffs, and had to have a crappy jungle path that's not ideal. How do you communicate to your team that you're way behind where you usually are at a certain point? How do you pick yourself up when like the early game just didn't go to plan at all? Because whether it's like a mental thing or whether it's just a, by the way, all those trades we practice aren't going to work because I can't be there when I usually am there. Like, how do you reset when the early game doesn't go your way, which is probably like, you know, 1 out of 5 games is just all over the place? What do you do?
I think something that's really, really important for a jungler is to be like really, really stable in a lot of ways, like kind of be the rock of the team. And even if you're put in the dirt, you need to be able to, tell your teammates that, okay, guys, I am in a rough position right now.
10 minutes.
But as long as, we play safe, we just try to play defensive for a moment, I'll climb back into the game eventually. And I also think, even though I had the Sylas game especially was a really bad one, but even in that game, I ended up stealing a Baron despite having a bad game the entire way through. And many of these things, some of the smaller highlights in some of the bad games are not really being talked about, right? People usually focus on all the negative things.
I think one of the interesting things as a jungler is when you do your job well, people don't really notice you doing your job well because you set the laners up a lot of the time and the laners take over. I'm interested in knowing, like, when you're in game, how does your decision-making process happen? Do you get called out by the laners to come to a specific lane, or do you have a certain plan in mind when you head because of the draft? Like, what is your priority when you're going into a game, and how do you make your decisions?
It varies a lot from game to game, I would say. Well, it's no secret that this split, me and Bwipo have been playing a lot together. We've been killing a lot of top laners, and in some of the scenarios, it's Bwipo saying, like, Broxah, look at top lane right now. Maybe if you're here in 30 seconds, we can get a kill. And sometimes it's me saying, like, Bwipo, go in right now. I'm going to beat them. We're going to kill this guy. And it kind of goes both ways. It's a bit of a balance. So sometimes, it's the laners calling to make the plays, and sometimes it's the junglers. But I think in general, the jungler is the one who's supposed to have the overview, right, of everything. And sometimes, Bwipo asks me to gank top, and I tell him that, it's not happening. Like, my bot lane needs me, so goodbye, my friends.
and Bwipo, as the top lane, obviously you've just talked about that synergy that you guys have built up in terms of that ganking, I guess, relationship, I suppose. Do you ever have a pressure on your shoulders when you, let's say we go into a game and Broxah invests all these resources into you. Do you have that pressure in the game, thinking, if I don't perform here, like, this is...
No, I mean, again, it's shared responsibility.
Yeah.
Ultimately, if I call for ganks top, I'm giving my jungler an opportunity is how I look at it, right? I'm giving him an opportunity. Broxah gets the chance to come top and maybe get something. If he doesn't, that's fine. He can still just go somewhere else if someone else suggests an opportunity. But if not, if there's nothing better to do on the map, you might as well look for something. And that's sort of the idea I have, is like, I at least want to have something to be doing, right? I want my jungler to be doing something, ganking top, bot, mid, doing dragon. I don't mind, as long as we're proactive when we can be.
Now, I want to bring up the standings, guys, because after this win today, you've obviously put yourself in secured second position, and we'll bring it up on the screen for our viewers. But right now, you guys are 10-3 going into G2 tomorrow. If you beat G2 tomorrow, I believe you're either going to be top or joint first. And I think because of the way that the second half of the split works, I don't know exactly where it lies, but you basically have a real shot at putting yourself back at the top of the table over G2. Does that weigh on your mind a little bit?
I mean, you guys would own the head-to-head, right? It would be 2-0 in Summer Split, so it would be a clear first place there. What should fans, what should people expect coming in tomorrow? Because we saw a Garen game from G2. We saw an Ivern game from Fnatic. I don't know if we'll see an Ivern or I
feel like there's a big difference between an Ivern pick and a Garen pick.
But I mean, to some people there isn't, right? But I agree with you. I think it's super viable. Like, what should we think going in tomorrow as neutrals trying to understand what the matchup looks like? Because a lot's happened since the last time you two teams fought.
Well, there will be blood. I think we're the two bloodiest teams in the LEC. We killed most people, so I think for sure there will be kills. I think that's one thing to look forward to. At least I look forward to it, obviously. I love my trades. I love taking fights. So in general, I think it'll just be a lot of contesting, but swingy. I do believe that whoever takes the advantage, the other team isn't out, but will be controlling the game for sure.
I want to come back to this discussion with G2 because we have got some lock scenarios to talk about when it comes to the playoffs. And I'm just going to essentially read these off because it can get a little bit complicated. But if you win tomorrow and I think Rogue lose, if you win or Rogue lose, you're locked in for playoffs. So that's the situation that happens there. Splyce lock if they win tomorrow against Rogue. So both you and Splyce have a chance to essentially lock yourself in the playoffs. You have double chances because if Splyce beat Rogue, they lock and then they lock you. So you basically get that given to you for free. Knowing how likely it is that you've secured yourself a playoff spot, does that make you feel more comfortable going into this matchup?
For us, all that matters right now is just to get top 2, really, because with the new playoff system, getting top 2 is so important. That's something we found out the hard way last split, where we were really close to actually entering top 2. We didn't get it. Origin took the spot instead, and then we had a long fight to even get to the semi-final match to begin with. And yeah, actually, you know, getting 2 shots at entering the final rather than 1 is really huge. And the team that has to go all the way through. I think we had to play 2 best-of-5s before even playing the semi-final. You know, that's a lot of games and a lot of strategy you're showing to the opposing team right there. So getting top 2 is all that matters for us. And well, we're pretty happy that we're not in the same situation as last split, where we were barely even getting to playoffs in the first place. Obviously, we haven't secured the spot quite yet, but it's looking much better at the very least.
And I got one last question. Garen top, OP or Int? What we got here? Come on, we got 2 experts. OP or Int on that Garen top?
I think it's Int into Karma. I'll give you that much.
That's fair.
I'll give you that much.
Come on, Boxer, you're no doubt a Garen expert.
If I see a Garen top in my solo queue game, I'm probably dodging.
Real talk, at least he could have done some research and realized that all the best Garen players play Predator. At the very least. Honestly, with Predator, there's hope for this champion.
All right, we learned something today.
There's Garen. You just run someone out with Predator?
Pappy, you might be done here. I'm not 100% done with these guys.
That's my last question. That's all I got. Now I got everything I need.
Papa's just silent for the
I'm
rest
just
of
back here. Yeah, okay. Analyst, by the way.
I don't know if you guys saw the G2 Grabs interview where he basically came out and said that players and teams that aren't locked in for playoffs, it's creating a negative atmosphere, that race for playoffs, and it's causing poor performances in teams. Do you resonate with that? Has that been a weight on your mind? Do you think it's an accurate statement? I'm just interested in getting your thoughts on that.
I think in general, when you're losing, it creates a bit more tension in general, because you know you're in a bit of a tricky position, and you know there's things you have to work out and improve on really fast to start getting wins on the board again. Like, even for ourselves, we had like a couple of pretty rough weeks compared to the start of the split, where we won every game pretty convincingly. And obviously, it's not as bad as being at the bottom and losing most of the games. But at the same time, you know, after losing a couple of games in a row, you kind of realize that, you know, this is not working, and then you need to figure out what the next step is going to be. There might be some disagreements within the team on what is working, what is not. And yeah, I think in general, when you're losing, you know, first of all, losing feels really bad, and then having to work out all the issues naturally create tension. I think that's, yeah, I don't think that's avoidable.
And do you resonate with that, Bwipo?
I think I have a bit of a different perspective. I feel like it's more about what could you have gotten. I feel like a lot of teams get trapped by this, right? For example, us last split, we're like, but if we won this one game, we could have got top 2 if we beat them in the tiebreaker, or anything like this. And I feel like that can happen to a 3rd place team, that can happen to a 4th place team. They're like, if we got 3rd place, or at least I've got to have the seeding right. Maybe that game could have been better. And then the problem with that is that the negative feelings of that game resurge, right? They come back, you remember, why did we actually lose that game? Oh, because this guy, okay, you know, and then you're going into a very negative mindset because, well, yeah, you did lose that game for a reason, and the blame comes back rather than just being, well, you stop turning the page. You go back, and that's negative for almost everybody. And in general, as long as a team doesn't fall into that trap of maybe we should have gotten 3rd or 2nd or whatever, I think the negative emotions are easily, well, removed.
And I come from a region that plays best of 3s, where if you have a bad game 1, you just kind of say, okay, right, we'll just, you know, you lose to one of the lower teams, okay, the next 2 games you can steady it. I imagine that if you come off a loss in, say, a Saturday game, and then you put all those hours into prep that don't actually have any transparency, you can't show those to the fans, that is the work you're doing, and then something happens that reminds you of that last game, the tilt comes in, like, it's so lopsided prep to stage time that I can only imagine the frustration that will call if the moment you start to feel the bad memories of the last time on stage.
Do you guys have any input from your, like, do you have like a sports psychologist or anything like that that helps you with dealing with these particular emotions?
Actually, last split, I think one of the things that helped us turn the entire split around was getting a sports psychologist that we luckily still have now, because I think many of these outside factors are starting to finally get more attention. One of them being like mental health, like having a sports psychologist come in and help with setting up different routines in that regard, like going to the gym or at least exercising in one way or another. Like, there's so many outside factors that many players actually don't really pay attention to that are really important when it comes to keeping a good performance. And for us, having a sports psychologist was pretty huge because we started having some tension in the team because, as we were saying, we started thinking about, why are you smiling?
We're talking about the gym, and I'm sitting here like...
So Bippo went, gym, and then he looked down, and then he looked
You'll go next week, mate. Don't worry about it. Next week, don't worry.
Next week, guys.
Me and Bippo got it. We were trying to keep it under wraps. No, but I actually don't know if you guys, I'm like medic. I used to be a doctor. I know how important that is to A, positive mental health, and B, also keeping yourself playing at your absolute peak performance. And I think it's something that is slowly starting to creep into esports, and that's really cool. I've always been a big advocate of physical exercise in esports and how that can contribute to a positive mindset, but also just a positive way that you approach the game in general. So that's obviously nice to see too. While I've got Papa Smithy here,
I'm listening.
I want to take this opportunity to talk about LCK versus EU, because I think it's no surprise that a lot of people consider Europe the best region in the world. But my question to you is Europe the best region in the world, or is it just G2? Because that's something.
And Fnatic, right?
Yeah, and Fnatic. But obviously, but when you look at actually the results in terms of international, all right, Papa. When you look at the results internationally, like it's obviously been G2 that's dominated the field. Do you think that EU has got a lot of catching up to do to G2? I think you're probably obviously close, if not, getting towards that equal level. Or do you think it is that Europe as a whole is an incredibly strong region?
Honestly, to answer that question, I kind of want to go back to semifinals MSI.
Okay.
SKT G2. I feel like, in general, when a best of 5 is played and there's 3 or 4 games, there's usually a clear better team. When there's 5 games, something goes down.
And if we're being real, the winner of that series wins the final. Almost
right, obviously. Right? But what I'm saying is near the end, right, I feel like game 5, when I watched that, it was the Pyke top, SKT pretty much ace G2. They go Baron when they really could have just, pushed in the waves, reset, played the map, and they probably would have won this game, right? But the panic kicks in. You're game 5, I'm winning this game, I'm winning the finals, right? TL just won yesterday, I'm taking that. I'm taking that first place if it's coming. That's what the players are thinking, right? That's kind of what we were thinking when we were going into World Semifinals, no offense to C9. But that's immediately what you're thinking about, and all of a sudden this all kicks in, right? You're like, in the moment, you're like, hell yeah, let's go. We just killed him, let's go Nash, let's go Nash, and then, wait, Pyke TP'd? Everyone starts dying, and then it kicks in, it's lost. So to answer that question, yes, I think G2 is the best team in the world, and with that, yeah, sure, LEC can be one of the best teams in the world if people can contest with them in a best of 5, right? We haven't seen that last split. Will we be able to see it this split? I'm confident in my own team to be able to do it. But it's still something that we're yet to see, because has any team pushed G2 further than SKT? No. So in that sense, I would say Korea's quite close.
And we had Duke on here last week, and he was basically saying that stylistically, he thinks Europe is better than LCK. In fact, he went as far as to say LCK is 2 years behind where they should be in terms of how they play the game. I'm going to actually start with you, Papas, given that you're the LCK.
Very inflammatory statement.
Yeah, well, I think it's definitely inflammatory, I guess, if you're an LCK fan, but it's an interesting topic to explore, because talking to you before we even started this show, you were like, yeah, I do think LCK are a little bit slow, a little bit behind. What is your opinion on how LCK play versus how you've seen Europe play during your time in LEC here?
I think in general, there's, to me, a right way to play the game based on the kind of the meta and like the rules Riot set out, which kind of changes every year when they do their biggest rework. And to me, the rule is first 14 minutes are really important because there's gold everywhere. Kills, don't even worry about them. Kill those turret plates. I call them kind of gold pinatas. You just whack on them and then eventually gold falls out and everyone's happy. And so the slow scaling games with 0 kills, 0 deaths, 1 turret plate across 2 games don't make a lot of sense with the rule set. Like, the game has been redefined over time, ever since Tracker's Knife was removed and warding was cut down. You can't just play the slow game and expect to win more often than not. Yep. But often we see Korean teams handshake and say, let's just go to late game. And that's a decision they've made. The one thing I'll say is that I think Duke's assessment is not wrong based on the games we've seen since Rift Rivals, because the meta has got really slow in Korea. 35, 40-minute games are becoming common. But if you look back at Rift Rivals, Korea was actually playing fast, kind of perceiving what they thought the Chinese teams would do, trying to adapt to a perceived meta, that in the end they were able to adapt to really well, but they came straight back to playing slow. So it's very interesting to me.
For me, early game meta, which for me, I'm not actually sure, because do Korean teams actually contest dragons a lot in the early game, or do they not? Because at that point, if you're actually contesting the dragons and that's what you're focused on, it makes sense to go for a later game because of the strength of dragons. They're really strong.
We definitely see sometimes teams give up drakes and sometimes lose games fighting for an ocean drake. That's the third spot. So,
obviously, I mean, it's more, for me, it's more like how often do they contest it pre-20 minutes, right? Like, are there 3 dragon spawns, 4 dragon spawns, or is it just like, yeah, maybe you'll get 1 or 2 dragons per game in an LCK game? Because that's where I'm interested, right? Because if you're going to the late game 30, 40 minutes, well, if you're the team with 2 or 3 or maybe 4 drakes, you really don't mind.
There's been a lot of free stacking, which doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense. The usual meta is that whichever team's playing bot side, weak side, chucks a control ward behind the pit and then tries to hide it and then tries to not give up too much. And then the Rift Herald trade comes in. But inevitably, you do see the 3, 4, 5, 6 Drake games that can get really, really crazy to evaluate. There's definitely ways to get into late game, but I just look at G2 play and see how much they can blow up the map in the early game and really get a lot of leads in the 2 lanes and kind of lose the minimum in the 1 lane. And I say, surely that's how the game should be played. And maybe that's just a pure analyst on the outside thing, but that to me looks like the same as Samsung White putting down 1 million control wards in 2014 or SKT's Vision games in 2016 coming from behind. To me, the G2 style fits the rules a lot better than trying to force in a style that Riot said no, no, no so many times.
I think it goes player skill too. Confidence is a really big deal, and I feel like in Korea, a lot of players have a lot of respect for each other.
Sure.
So, you know, are they going to pick a hard-winning lane and step up and slam the guy in lane like G2 does? Not always, right? And that's kind of what is necessary if you want to have those 2 winning lanes. You need a mid laner or any kind of laner, really. That's just going to be like, give me the Yasuo, this guy's going down. Give me the Gragas, give me whatever. I'm going to solo kill this guy, or I'm going to put him in the dirt.
I actually could listen to you guys go on forever, but I do need to move on because we need to have a look at the schedule coming up tomorrow. We have got more games, believe it or not, guys. We've got a whole other day, and I've talked about that big game at the end of the day, our match of the week, which obviously is G2 versus Fnatic. Other games to look out for: Misfits SK, Vitality XL, Rogue, Splice, and Origin Schalke. Apart from the match of the week, guys, any other game that you, from a personal standpoint, are interested in the results?
OG Schalke.
I agree.
I think this will set the tone for who's going to be the runner-up to Splice, right?
I think that's a pretty fair call. I'm holding out my hand as someone who kind of believes in where XL's going right now. They're on a 3-0 streak. Vitality also coming off a couple of victories recently and kind of a come from behind game, which hasn't been their MO. So that's actually one, like, from what you guys kind of have felt around there without leaking anything, like, what are you feeling like XL versus Vitality, like tomorrow, best of 1?
I was thinking the same. This match is really interesting as well because both were looking pretty poor in the beginning of the split, but now they're actually starting to, you know, get things working and get things back together, right? So I honestly think this one can go either way, but I would probably give a small edge to XL despite Vitality actually.
We're going to see who's going to fight for that 6th place, right? More often than not. Which is why, again, my eyes are more on the higher-end games, but that's because we're worried about what team is going to contest us, right? Yeah. But in general, I think it's going to be an interesting game to watch and to see who can actually keep the trend, right? Who's going to keep winning? Are they going to be able to bring back the elements that make them win? And then it becomes interesting, right? Because when you match up against them, you're actually going to have to prep for that. And I feel like that's a big deal that a lot of teams that kind of disrespect going later on into the season is like, oh, we have, let's say, G2 XL or we have G2 Vitality. Let's focus all the prep on G2, and then, wait a minute, guys, what happened?
When are we getting the Papa Bwipo podcast? Because I feel like you guys could literally talk about anything and just bounce off each other all day. I have to call it a close there, though, guys. It's been a really fantastic PGL. And whilst League of Legends is done tonight in Europe, LCS Academy is starting soon. Team Liquid is taking on stop with the hums. Team Liquid is taking on TSM in their quarterfinals. After that, you can catch the games that you missed today on our rebroadcast. So we'll be back tomorrow. It will be a huge set of games, culminating with that final game of Fnatic versus G2, Week 7 of the LEC. Ready check starts at 4:30 CST. See you then.
there's no flash on the Irelia. He's going to try and dodge around here as Mystiques is in range. Looking for the Devour. Gets it out just in time. But he spits Mickey back out. Mickey gets a kill. Now Snarballs coming out. And Exel have turned this one around. Zerti trying to trade in. It's two! It's two for Exel! The Mystiques is dead. Couldn't pop the thick skin. Mickey jumping in at the Vanguard's edge. Will he go in? Will they find the Pop Blossom? That's huge! That connects on all of them. Tommy trying to escape, but the double comes in for Expect as they continue what would be a miraculous playoff run as they defeat Splyce. Flashes away from the cannon barrage. Dreams is down, but Finn might be short to follow. Hansa GA is going to come back up, and now Subway's dead. SK, they have not managed to break this base. Finn back up to score! I cannot believe it! Shot's down, and the TP comes in, and Rogue stole the game away from SK.
Oh my word!
I wonder, you can in as much as you want, but you're gonna carry anyways.
16 minutes in, they are a long, long way behind. Jackdaw caught out just a little bit here, but look how much damage Mickey takes already. He's done. Attila gets the kill. A counter kill comes out for Caps. Down towards the bottom side, Yakos is kicked away by Mowgli. Camouflage joining the fight, and Caps is rooted up in place. It's a double Vitalities, and they continue their climb to playoffs.
Now here comes Neon and Dan as well, and it's still not done. Alphari's gonna get another. The huge HP. He's still alive. He's not done yet. Finally, Neon takes him down, but the Drake's line from Miffy convinces Origin to secure the ace thing, and Origin turn their attention to the Nexus. Origin stop the losing streak in its tracks. Defensive flash from Trick. Whippo flash forward, gets the third Q, continuing to chase. There's the redemption. Oh no, one they flashes inside the members of Fnatic, but there's simply not enough. Trades his life for Broxers, and Fnatic aren't done. Ignite forced to flash defensively. Nemesis picks himself up the kill, chasing the KDA. Uptick gets pulled backwards, the Nexus falls. Fnatic take down Schalke.